In this video, it's my pleasure to be interviewing Rich Munitz. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy this video. Please like and subscribe, and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Please let me know what you think in the comments below and what you'd like to see in future videos so I can work on that. My book, Backgammon, Backgame Strategies, is available. There's a link in the description to where you can get it. And if you're interested in lessons, please contact me via email. My email address is in the description. By way of introduction, I'm going to read. This is what we have on the USBGF website about Rich Munitz. So I'll go ahead and read this. Rich Munitz is a rare combination of a top-notch world-class player, director, prolific organizer, tireless volunteer, and mediator. As a player, Rich won the ABT Tour in 2006 and 18. He is one of only 3 people to have won it more than once. The other 2 are in the Hall of Fame. He also recorded a second-place finish in 07 and third in 2010. He has won 9 ABT tournaments in total as of 22. As of this writing, he ranks 5th on the all-time ABT points list, which means he has more ABT points than all but 4 players in the USBGF Hall of Fame. He has been voted to the Giants of Backgammon list 4 times, including 3 times in the top 32. As of December 2021, he had the highest ELO rating in ABT matches of any player with at least 50 experience points. While he has achieved greatness as a player, his contributions as a volunteer, organizer, and director may be even more impressive. Rich was a founding member of the USBGF. He has served on the board of directors since its inception. He has volunteered thousands of hours of his time helping advance the participation and orderly enjoyment of the game. He is among the 2 or 3 people that have had the most impact on organizing and growing the USBGF and backgammon in the United States. Much of what Rich has done goes under the radar and is not fully appreciated by many. Here's a list of a few of the things Rich has done. He has chaired the USBGF Rules and Ethics Committee and Ratings and Stats Committee. He developed the USBGF's master point system and the points calculation software. He developed the ABT points formula for Swiss and round-robin tournament formats. He wrote the USBGF tournament rules ratified by the members in 2017. And which are now the standard rule set for the ABT. He wrote the companion document to the tournament rules, the USBGF Tournament Ruling Guide. He has authored a recurring column in Primetime Magazine, What's the Ruling? He arranged for the acquisition of the backgames.org system by the USBGF. He helped the USBGF online tournament system, the software and website used to manage tournaments, track live brackets, and calculate stats for the USBGF online tournament series, the ABT and the ABT Online. Any 1 or 2 of those accomplishments, along with his 13 years of service on the board, would be enough to warrant a Lifetime Achievement Award, but in totality, his contributions are mind-boggling. As an organizer and director of the New York City Backgammon Meetup Club, he has helped attract 2,000 registered members, which is far and away the biggest club in the U.S. and one of the largest in the world. He teaches beginners and intermediates at the club, and he cultivates grassroots development of casual backgammon play in New York City, where the 2020 New York Metro had 81 beginners. Most tournaments are lucky enough to have 8, if that. As a mediator and diplomat, he has fostered good working relationships between the USBGF, directors, and players through instituting good governance practices and collaboration on rules and other policies. As a result of his years of work, he's been able to provide a suite of tools to greatly reduce the overhead and barriers to entry of running backgammon tournaments, which will greatly help to grow the game. No one else could have done it like this. Rich has worked tirelessly to ensure the game of backgammon is enjoyed by so many others, and that the backgammon community will thrive for generations to come. It is truly a pleasure to have Rich Munitz. Thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Glad to be here chatting. I just want everybody to know I did not write that, but yeah, it's a little bit out of date at this point. But yeah, backgammon is my life, and I'm happy and thrilled to kind of bring it to others.
Great, wonderful. We're happy to have you. Look forward to speaking about that. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Doing great.
And you're joining us from, are you in New York City?
I'm maybe 25 miles north and west of New York City, close enough to work in New York City, but still have a yard and good schools and all that stuff. So yeah, out here in the suburbs.
Great, great. Looking forward to discussing a lot of backgammon related topics. I'd like to start, if I may, with a little background biographical information. Where were you born and raised, and where did you study?
So yeah, I've been a lifelong resident of New York, whether in this living in the city or in the suburbs. And I went to school in the State University of New York system at Stony Brook, and studied computer science, both uh, as an undergrad and as I got my master's as well. So and yeah, I software development has been my career. I'm currently senior software developer at Bloomberg, and do a lot of exciting stuff there, and absolutely love it. Great company to work for. So yeah, and then of course, in my abundant spare time, I continue to write software for the U.S. Backgammon Federation, amongst other things.
That's fantastic. And are you married and you have kids?
All of the above. I am married happily for 30 years at this point, and have three boys, the last of which just graduated college. So I'm sort of free in a sense. But yeah, but still everybody's kind of around, having moved in for during COVID, and well, we still have two of them with us. So
All right. And no grandchildren yet?
no, no, absolutely not.
That's I hear that's really fun.
Well, we'll find out.
Yeah. Did
Yeah,
you ever,
the difference is, of course, unlike when they're your own kids, they you can leave at the end of the day. So
right, right. Did you ever play backgammon with your kids when they were growing up?
I did. I actually started teaching them probably when they were 3 years old, just how to do things like bearing off checkers and so on. Um, my oldest son, uh, Jonathan, still plays to this day. He has played on a few of the ABT tournaments at the intermediate level, not serious like I am, but he can play. He's actually won an intermediate tournament on the ABT. And my middle son had signs of being a future world champion when he was about 7 years old, and out of nowhere explained to me the principle of recirculating checkers. I mean, 7 years old, and then like it blew my mind. And then like immediately after that said, "Yeah, I'm kind of tired of this. I don't feel like playing anymore," and stopped playing the game at that point. So.
Well,
uh,
that's great. Did you did you learn backgammon when you were a child yourself, or how'd you get into it?
well, that's actually kind of a funny story, because uh, I have to think that backgammon must have been a calling for me, because I grew up. I was maybe, I don't know, 8 years old. It was early 70s. Backgammon was amongst the most popular games on in the country at that time, and I didn't have a clue about that. Not a clue. But I was an only child. My parents dragged me shopping, so I would just hang out always in the toy section and the where the games were and everything. And somehow this game grabbed my eye. It was just one of these, you know, cardboard checkerboards, kind of thing, with the plastic checkers folded in half, and it was $1.99. I didn't know what it was, but it called to me, and I absolutely had to have it, and I would not let my parents leave without buying it for me. And I never did that. I was not the type who ever like went out and said, "Oh, you got to buy me this, buy me that," and they did not know what hit them. And they finally were like, well, okay, it's not like this happens all the time. And they bought it, and that was it. That was it. It just called to me, and I had to have it, and I taught myself how to play. And it really wasn't until I went to college that I found other people who knew the game, and like everybody knew the game. What's going on here? It was great. So, yeah, it kind of went from there. Um, I found a club that I could, sort of travel to while I was in college. Played a bunch of tournaments there, at the club. Found out I was, a pretty good intermediate level player, and and then sort of stopped playing for years. And it wasn't until kind of, I guess Jellyfish came around and I had a way of actually getting good competition that I kind of picked up the game again.
Which clubs were around at that time?
I was going to a club in Long Island, and I mean, there were a number of pretty strong players there. I really didn't know them. I didn't play with them, but it was a pretty well attended club at that time. Several dozen people there on any given night, two divisions of tournaments, a lot of fun. So it kind of hooked me.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it's a great hobby. A lot of people enjoy it. Do you have other interests and hobbies outside of backgammon, of course?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally one dimensional, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean, you can kind of see behind me. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so that's Mr. Spock behind me, and but really, I would say that my I mean, when I was younger, I was an avid racquetball player before I even got into competitive backgammon. This was kind of through the maybe mid 90s, and fairly top level player at the time, kind of equivalent to what we would call open, but there were sometimes as many as 6 skill divisions at tournaments. So open really was at the highest level. And interestingly, through racquetball, I discovered that I had something of a passion for rules because I learned all the rules. I became a nationally certified referee and learned that I was the first person, at least as far as the National Rules Commissioner ever knew, to get a perfect score on the rules exam. An interesting crossover. You know who wrote the rules of racquetball? It was none other than Phil Simborg.
Really? I'm not
Yeah,
surprised to hear
and
that.
I only found that out years later after I was no longer playing racquetball and I was into backgammon. All of a sudden, that connection came up. So yeah, small world.
Yeah, that's great. When you first started playing when you were a child, or perhaps later on when you were in school, what did you enjoy most about backgammon, either at the time or now to this day?
Well, that really hasn't changed, and that is I enjoy the unpredictability of the game. The fact that every game right from the beginning just about is something different, and so it's not simply about memorizing these deep openings and searching 20 moves ahead and whatever. I mean, it was all visual, conceptual. You just had to really have a good intuitive feel for things and, sort of understand all the nuances, plan strategy, come up with a game plan and things like that. It wasn't just about who can brute force, see things. And I love the excitement of the game in that you just can make the right decisions and fall on your face. You can kind of make mistakes and still get by and still survive to fight more. But that in the end, making good decisions was going to get you ahead. And this is what life is all about, right? This game is such a good proxy for life decisions, real life decisions, right? You make decisions all the time in life, and you don't have all the information. There are things you can't control. There are things you can't predict, and you've got to make choices anyway. And this teaches us how to do that. So I think right from the beginning, this game prepared me for life, and I think it still does. And it can prepare anybody for life. It can. This is such a great game to help people with the realities of life.
I would agree. I think there's a lot of you try to quantify your risk, your reward, the ratio of risk versus reward, and other things. It takes a lot to get good at it, both, of course, in backgammon and in life, in any sort of business. Now you're one of the top players. How did you improve and get to the level that you're at, and how would you recommend others to do so?
Well, that's kind of a good question, and I don't think that there is a cookie cutter answer for that. But there is one thing that is going to be in common to uh, every different approach, and that is being willing to put in the work, right? In my case, I was pretty much self-taught. I didn't have I never in my life took a lesson. Nobody ever explain things to me. I figured it out on my own. And that was largely, I mean, I read a lot, of course, right? Of course, you got to read to sort of plant some ideas. But the hard work uh, for me was about uh, playing with the computers, analyzing my play, and not just, looking, oh, this is the answer. Okay, I was wrong, but really digging in and figuring out why, right? I mean, what are the concepts that I was missing here? What are the factors involved? How are you supposed to weigh the different factors? And you do things like uh, trying to come up with, it's like the scientific method. You sort of come up with a hypothesis, right, for why is this right? Why is this better? And what are the key features that are involved? And then you do experiments to test that. You start playing with the position. Well, if my hypothesis is correct, then if I make this change, the outcome should change in this way. And does that come true? And you either reinforce your hypothesis or there's something unexpected, in which case there's another opportunity to learn. So I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff, and eventually gain the experience, gain the understanding necessary to really excel at this game. And I had no idea how good I was at the time. I really didn't. I was like working in a vacuum pretty much by myself. I attended tournaments here and there, and I had okay results, but really didn't have a clue until, I mean, I was playing, I started playing at a club again and things like that. And, was really, really successful. I mean, I was cleaning up and, so it was clear, okay, sure, against these guys, these club players, I was obviously, quite strong, but it wasn't until the club director started telling me, he's like, you got to go to tournaments. You're as good as any of these guys out there. And I'm like, no, there's no way. These guys wrote the books. How can I possibly be as good as them? And he's like, trust me, you are. You'll see. So that kind of is what pushed me to start attending major tournaments. Is somebody else had confidence in my abilities that I really didn't know. I had no scale on which to measure myself. But you know, it, I guess he was right. I did okay.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you mentioned is actually really good because a lot of the people, my students and others, they always ask, okay, I can play on the computer, but the computer only tells me what the right move is. It doesn't explain why. And I think your explanation basically tells people what to do, how to learn. You basically make a modification, you make a variant of the position and see what changes, and that basically tells you what was the reason. So that's very good. And you said you also read some books. What books did you read? And what did you find was most important for
Well,
you?
certainly, reading a book like McGreal was great. Some of Roberti's books were really good at the time. Uh, it's kind of about it. The books give you the tools, right? They explain to you various concepts, what things to consider, what things to look at, what can be important. Uh, they give you that framework, but they don't tell you how to apply it, right? There may be one position they give you, and for all you know, it's not even the correct answer that they give you, but they're trying to explain a concept in isolation. But you don't have isolated concepts in backgammon. You have numerous concepts that are competing with each other all the time. And it's about understanding what's important and what is more important than other things, and finding more than one thing that sort of argues for something. And that's kind of where that work on your own is going to come from, right? You know what the concepts are if you studied and if you've read that stuff, but you don't know how to apply it. And that's kind of the key, is figuring out how to apply it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. There've been a lot of books. I enjoy reading myself, and I've read a lot too. There have been a lot of good books. Uh, Unfortunately, not as many as other games like maybe chess or poker, because it's probably not as popular as those games. But I feel like in the last few years, maybe 5 to 10 years, there've been kind of like a lot of books written. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I've got a stack of them, which I have to at some point open, because my schedule has been packed. So I see a book, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have that, but don't have the time to read it. And that's sort of part of the problem is, you know, I, I sort of had gotten to the point where I accomplished in this game what I set out to accomplish. And I've got nothing more I need to prove to myself or to anyone. So it's become about giving back to me. And so, well, the casualty has been, I've kind of stopped studying. I've stopped spending that time. I've stopped keeping myself sharp. And I can coast, but my game is not where really it could be. And at some point, I'll get back to that, and I'll return to that. But right now, I've got things to do, so that to me is more important.
it's definitely hard to put in that time that's needed when you have a day job, family, all sorts of other things. And I know you have given back, as evidenced by your Lifetime Achievement Award. We talked about one of the things we always like to do is grow backgammon. I know you've grown backgammon, at least in the New York area, for a very long time and very successfully. Um, what are you in your opinion, what are the keys to growing a club or getting more people involved?
Well, my approach has been that, first and foremost, backgammon is a fun, friendly game that anybody can play, and that anybody can enjoy. It's very social. And so I like to create an environment that is welcoming and fun, and that people can learn, but it's not about you know super competition and swimming in a shark tank and trying to survive. I mean, you're gonna. I've always believed that the growth of this game is going to come from the grassroots. It's going to come from attracting people to the game, making them feel like it's something fun to do that they can enjoy, and that they, will want to do again. And so for that reason, I the club that I run is actually a meetup club, right? It is not a hardcore backgammon club where the top players are going to come and we're going to run our tournaments and so forth. It's not that. This is about more the beginner levels, the intermediate levels, and getting people in the door and getting them exposed to and enjoying the game of backgammon. And so that's what I do. I for several hours we have people in. I help them out. I pair them up. If needed. Most of the time, people figure it out on their own. And what I do is each time we do this, which is once a month, I will sort of run a lesson for the group. And so we'll all just, those who are interested, we'll all gather around the board and we'll just play me against the world and we'll just talk about everything. And I think I've got a pretty good way of explaining things to people, right? How do you think over the board? And it sort of helps them get to the next level, right? They kind of can see that there's more going on, but it's not in an intimidating way, right? We don't even talk about the doubling cube and things like that. Just okay, here are more things that you can think about, right? Do with it as you will. And so I think this is and we've got some regulars, but there's a lot of new people kind of moving through all the time. And this is kind of about just getting those people exposed, getting it out there. Uh, but it does lead to sort of a good beginner culture in the city, and a lot of interest, I think. And we certainly were able to see this kind of interest at the New York Metro, where Lynn runs, in addition to the normal two divisions at the top, she runs two separate beginner groups, kind of, you could think of it as skill level 3 and skill level 4, if you will. But she'll pull in 50 to 80 people between those two levels. Like, that's just unheard of. And a lot of these people are just these people who have been exposed and who have sort of said, okay, let me check this thing out. So I think it shows that this approach can work. um, and I've heard unbelievable stories about backgammon groups popping up all over New York City at this point. Uh, I just had a great conversation with Victor about this in DC, and he was telling me about stories about all these different groups that he's encountered, and I've heard of things as well. So it's not just my group at this point. Things are sprouting up, and as a social game, as a beginner game, it's sprouting up. I was asked to uh, run a session for some group, and it was literally 20 people who had never played the game before, but they were all part of some social, internet thing, whatever, some organization or whatever. And I taught 20 people how to play backgammon one night. That was it. It was just they wanted to learn. And so, yeah, I think this is kind of it. Making it friendly at the grassroots is a key to it. But I think we all know that uh, the internet is where people are, right? Especially the young people. And so things like streaming and things like exciting things about the game that they can find and they can watch at their leisure, that's engaging, is I think good as well. Uh, I've got mixed feelings about bots as part of the streaming. I really do, because on the one hand, uh, it's always good to get some information, but on the other hand, when people start getting into all the math and all the analysis and things like that, I think it can be a turnoff as well. So I think we've got to try it all different ways and see what sticks. But somewhere there's a sweet spot, and I think we'll find it. But I think engaging people online is also extremely important. I don't have time to do that, but I think it's important.
Right, right. So yeah, that's interesting. A lot of the grassroots efforts is fantastic, and other people mentioned that. I certainly agree. How would you say people find out about you? Because, you run the club once a month or whatever it is. How do you get the word out?
Well, the word, I'm not, I'm not into marketing. I'm not like a marketer, right? I'm sure other people are very good at that, but that's kind of not me, and I don't have time for that. But that's one of the reasons that we are on meetup.com, because meetup.com is a site specifically intended for people to find things to do, right? That is what the website's purpose is. So anybody can come along if they have an interest, they want to form a group that does something, they can come along and form a group there. And you've got keywords and you got all this stuff, and it's all searchable. And so people who are interested, oh, maybe we can go and play some games one night. What's available? Well, they may stumble upon us. Certainly if you're into backgammon, you can find backgammon, but it sort of gives people a place to go to find like-minded people who are engaged in a certain interest, and something that's really social a lot of times more than hardcore, right? And that's what it's about. This is about social. It's about, people kind of still learning the games. Some of them are okay. It's not like we don't have people who are more advanced, but it's kind of a different thing from a lot of backgammon clubs that exist, where it's all about the real hardcore players. You got those same regulars every time, and a couple of people might walk in the door here and then. This is different. This is very different. So it's another way of doing things, but I rely upon this website to do their marketing, to find the people for me. That's why I pay for membership, so I can have a group there.
Right.
So
That sounds really good. It's a good opportunity. Have you ever considered like a USBGF initiative to have uh, meetups in various cities? I know you obviously have it in New York, but if we could get that in other cities, I feel like that would help.
yeah, well, that is a interesting idea, and it is one that has been looked at. The difficulty is you need the person to drive the group, right? You can't just, as a detached organization, say, oh, let's just create a meetup in Philadelphia. Well, you need
Right.
somebody in Philadelphia to show up every time and to engage the people and to, do what an organizer does. So that's the problem. Certainly, the USBGF is there to help support those efforts. If somebody's like, how do I run a tournament? Okay, sure, that's something we can help with, but it is unfortunately cost prohibitive to simply start spinning up meetup clubs everywhere.
Right.
uh that's kind of the problem. It isn't cheap,
Yeah.
and to just throw money at it is not necessarily an effective use of the organization's funds, right? But you know groups have to be self-sustaining. That's really what it comes down to. And whether that means, you charge people a couple of bucks, or, somebody's willing to put up a couple $100 out of their own pocket, as I do, you know, to keep the site going. Uh, that's kind of what you need. But it's, I think we can support, but we can't do that. You need at the grassroots. You need somebody at the grassroots. Somebody's got to be there.
I think the USBGF, since its inception, I know you've been a member, I've been a member since its inception. I feel like it's gone a long way in terms of where we were at before it started and now in terms of all the things that have been done by the USBGF. And you in particular have been involved in a lot of those things. I know we'll talk about the rules. What do you feel like, other than the rules, have been kind of your greatest accomplishments or the USBGF's greatest accomplishments since its inception?
Well, certainly helping to get the organization off the ground, is something I'm particularly proud of. I mean, you know, th- this was this was a need, and people had to step up at the beginning and really be able to kind of do the hard work of getting things going. So that's certainly something I see as important. Uh, creating the groundwork for recognition in terms of master points and things like that is something I spent a fair amount of time in the early days working on. The ability to compute that stuff and so on. Um, and but the biggest challenge that often happens with organizations is kind of either you have a problem that there aren't any people who want to do anything, right? Or you've got more people that want to do stuff, but nobody's on the same page. And one of the things that I think I've always really done well is uh, kind of providing that glue that holds things together, right? I'm not going to be the face of the organization, right? I mean, I've certainly given my speeches and so on back in the early days, here and there, but I'm not going to be that face of the organization. I'm not going to be the one promoting. I'm just going to do the hard work behind the scenes. That's what I do. And one of the things that I've always been able to do well is, you know, it, Alex, I'm sure hopefully you're going to be elected to the board this year, given the number of people running and the number of seats available. I hope you make it. But you'll kind of see what it's about, and it's hard to appreciate it. That sometimes people almost like backgammon, right? You're missing the key concept, right? You're staring there, you're looking at all the pieces, and everybody's pointing to this piece and that piece and so forth, but nobody's seeing the key concept. And that's something I've always found I can do. I can look at something and say, you know what, this is what's important here, right? Or this is the thing everybody should be looking at, and sort of helping to build that consensus by focusing around the important things and kind of getting rid of all the fluff that is a distraction, or just being able to say, well, wait a minute, what about this, right? Sometimes people will sort of sit and they'll listen, but they're expecting somebody else to talk, right? And in the end, they'll have an opinion, they'll vote, whatever, but sometimes there's more going on than meets the eye, right? And so I've always found myself having an ability to spot those things and say, okay, what about this other thing? And, should we consider that? And what are the implications of what we're doing down the road? How's that going to affect people? Is that going to upset people? There are things like that. And we've learned certain lessons the hard way. I mean, let me tell you, the organization has, with the best of intentions, made certain decisions without really thinking about the impact. And, there's been blowback. So you've got to learn those lessons. And so, okay, well, what are the processes we should put in place? How do we avoid these problems again? And so I think a lot of my contributions have been in those areas to sort of, keep the wheels well oiled, keep things glued together from falling apart, and nobody notices that, right? Nobody notices because it's all behind closed doors. It's like my driver's ed teacher used to say when he says, when somebody asks how's my driving, the best answer they'd love to hear is, I didn't notice, right? Well, it's the same thing with an organization. If you almost don't know it's there, but things are going smoothly, that's when it's at its best, right? So that's what I want to, that's what I like to try and do.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. I know there's a lot of things that go on. People talk and they kind of come up with compromises. Not everyone always agrees and things like that. And that happens with everything. I know we've discussed the rules, and that's one of the specific things that you've been focused on. So I want to discuss that a little bit more. I know that recently you worked with many others to collectively have a single set of unified rules throughout the world, not just the USBGF, but other federations. What were the key things to kind of get around all the differences for you so that people can learn about it?
Well, first of all, you can't have a unified set of rules unless that's everybody's goal, right? So it has to start with having people who see that as the end game and want it, right? Now, what? So we certainly had a challenge in that, the USBGF came out with its own set of rules, and it was really well thought out and all that. And when I talk about blowback, that was one of them. With the best of intentions, USBGF said, here's our rules. And okay, USBGF acquired the ABT. So, well, it made the most sense in the world. The ABT is going to use the USBGF rules. Well, guess what? We didn't ask anybody. And, what's going to happen is, of course, there was huge blowback. I mean, like you can't imagine. So, and this was even before I was involved with rules. This whole thing just exploded over rules, and it was a disaster that you can't even imagine. And people were walking away from this, and finally I'm like, okay, well, I've got to step in, right? I can do this. I can make this is kind of something I do well. I can work with people. I can reach agreements. I can, get everybody on board, and I can listen. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this work. And it's about listening. It's about what are your concerns? What are your difficulties? What is it that you really want? Can you live with this, or is it a showstopper? Right? You got to ask these questions. If you like this better, explain why. Right? Having that open mind to input is critical. And so, that's what happened with the USBGF rules. The one that worked, the one that was accepted everywhere, came about through that process. It was kind of start over. Yes, let's use a lot of the ideas we had from before, but let's start over and really listen and get everybody's buy-in. And that's what happened. And one of the big gripes about what we did, there were so many good changes to the rules that were introduced. A lot of innovation came about through that process. But the biggest gripe was, we're moving away from the rest of the world, right? We were closer before. We've now moved even further away.
In what way?
Well, there were just all of these rule changes that were made. Things like dice on checkers. I mean, obviously, that was just a divisive issue. But even things like the ability to play with only 2 dice when there's no clock. Nobody ever did that before, right? This was an innovation. Up until these new unified worldwide rules, it was still illegal in the rest of the world for people to use 2 dice without a clock. Illegal, right? And in the United States, we take it so much for granted. This was one of the most popular things that occurred, right? Almost everybody plays this way now. But up until a few months ago, it was illegal to do that anywhere else in the world, right? So these are areas that we moved away. There were other areas that we moved away. Things like what constitutes a double, right? Well, we made it so that touching the cube is what commits you to double. In other places, it was kind of the nebulous, does your hand move in that direction, right? Well, that kind of does it. Well, it's better to have a definitive test for, did you double? You touched it or you didn't, right? Everybody can tell that. If we agree on whether you touched or not, well, we know what the resulting action was. But a reach, well, did your hand twitch? Were you reaching for the cube? Were you reaching for the clock? Who the heck knows why your arm was moving, right? So these were improvements that were made. But anyway, there were a bunch of these things, and in the end, once what happened was the USBGF and the World Backgammon Federation wanted to get together, right? It's like, okay, we can't be a world federation if 2 of the biggest countries in the world are not on board, being the US and Japan, right? So a process started to say, okay, what's it going to take, right? Essentially, the WBGF was the European Federation, right? They renamed themselves, but they were the Europeans. So how do we get the rest of the world on board? And one of the obvious issues were rules, because, well, everybody's got to be on the same rule set. So that's kind of how it began. And, you know, like I said, it's always about having somebody willing to do the hard work. Well, this was never going to happen unless somebody put in the work to dig in and go through every rule set out there and figure out what were the differences, right? You can't agree on something if you don't know where you're different. And so that was a major effort that I went through
Right. I
because
have to,
yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I have to congratulate you on that. That's a monumental effort that you took upon yourself as well as various others. I think it's certainly great to have a unified set of guidelines. And I think what I was most impressed about when I read the newest set of rules that are, from my understanding, set to be in place starting in 2024 is the amount of flexibility in the rules, in that it's optional, things are optional or preferred or by the choice of the tournament director. That way, everyone can abide by the same rules, but if someone has one preference, they can still do that. One of the things I asked you recently on one of the online forums regards the use of baffle boxes. For me, I find that it just speeds things up a lot, which is great for everyone. And I just drop the dice into the baffle box. Some people say, okay, well, you need to use the cups in the baffle box. Well, then what's the purpose of the baffle box? I understand that in the past, there were other types of baffle boxes that didn't work as well as the current ones that scramble them really well. But then there were other people that said, okay, if you pick them up, you have to mix it up and scramble them in your hand before dropping them in there. And that's just like wasting more time, which I don't like to do. What is the actual rule? Are you allowed to just pick it up and drop it directly into the box?
Yeah, you are. Like, first of all, let's be clear. Nobody is forced to use a baffle box,
Right.
right? The director can always impose one, but nobody's forced to use one. So we're only talking about those people who actually want to use one or are willing to use one, whatever. But yes, the recognition is that at this point in time, baffle boxes are reliable, right? They are well designed. They are randomizers of dice. The vast majority of them are transparent, so you can inspect the inner workings. And we accept, and there's been no evidence to the contrary, we accept that baffle boxes randomize dice. Well, if they randomize dice, then what are you doing in your hand trying to shake your dice, right? What's the cup doing, right? Random on top of random is no more random. So the view is, sure, if you want to do that, go right ahead, but it's not necessary because the box itself does it. And let's be real, right? Why do we say that cups are okay, right? Well, gee, cups are, potentially subject to manipulation. You got all sorts of ways somebody can do something nasty with a cup, right? You can always come up with those fears, right? Some dice mechanic that maybe they don't put the dice into the cup, right? They hold it in their hand, one of the dice in their hand outside the cup. They don't let you see it, and they slide it onto the board, right? So you get all these stories. So what are we to do? We're going to say, well, gee, you're allowed to roll from a cup, but you got to roll through the baffle box, right? Because, well, we can't trust the cup. Well, no, of course we're not going to do that, right? We're going to say that, well, if you use the dice cup as it's designed, it's going to do the job. Well, you know what? A baffle box is going to do the job too. So just as we don't force you to roll your dice through a baffle box from the cup, we're not going to force you to dump the dice into the baffle box from the cup, right? Same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That
What would
argument
you
works both ways.
Right. What would you say if you were a tournament director or on the rules committee to a player that wanted to impose or force his opponent to throw the dice in the baffle box in the baffle box in a certain way, or mix it up in their hands before, but the opponent didn't want to do that, they just wanted to drop it? What would you tell that person?
I would tell that person that the rules don't require that. End of story,
Yeah. So
right?
some people are hard to maybe they're hard of hearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, make make your case for why the rules don't allow this, or the rules require something more than dropping. But no, that's not the case. Now, one of the new rules, which is also it's an innovation for this new year. This is a rule that was not part of any rule set before. Uh, is that, and I think this is a game changer in a lot of ways. Uh, and that is that a player is allowed to simply call no dice before the dice settle, and dice or the dice roll is void, right? And think about what that means, right? That means that it doesn't matter what you do, as long as the dice have not begun to settle, you can say no roll and it doesn't count. So this lets people, if they've got a concern about a roll, right? Oh, there's a problem here. I saw something fishy, whatever it might be, they can cancel the roll at will. And as long as the players agree that the dice had not begun to settle, it just gets done over. And this avoids all sorts of problems, right? From the time that you drop the dice into the baffle box and one of them bounces up and out, doesn't go through the baffle box, right? Well, try and argue that after the fact, right? I thought it did go through. I thought it didn't go through. You can't. Who's going to win that argument if it's not being recorded, right? But if you just say no dice or no roll or whatever, it's just done over.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to streamline a lot of short circuit a lot of these problems.
I think that's certainly a good rule. That's a rule we use in our duets, and I think that will help things. I know there are many, many rules. I've read the rules. It's like many pages, and we can kind of go on forever. But before we run out of time, I wanted to go through a couple of other things. I know I did discuss your Lifetime Achievement Award. What would you say you've been the most proud of in terms of accepting that award?
Well, that's kind of an easy one to me, right? I mean, of course, we can talk about whatever, all the tournaments I've played or won or whatever, but to me, what I see as my greatest achievement is what is it that I'm going to leave behind for everybody else? What am I leaving that will be visible and tangible and continue to provide benefit long term? And to me, that is the online tournament software that I've developed for the USBGF. Uh, this software is currently being used to run all of the online USBGF tournaments and all of the American Backgammon Tour tournaments. So we're talking about getting the players registered and into events and uh, generating brackets and being able to print those brackets and stick them on the wall and you know calculate all the stats in real time as things happen and be able to have people from the public. For years it was like, well, gee, can somebody post pictures of brackets? I want to know what's going on. Well, guess what? All of this stuff is now available in largely real time on the website as it happens. So I think that and there is going to be more coming. I mean, that is something I'm going to be continuing to work on. I think that is something that is going to be brought to local clubs, right? So that not just the USBGF events, but in the future, clubs will be able to use this system to run their tournaments, to keep all their stats and things like that. And this has just been an enormous effort. I can't even say how much time and effort I put into this. I've been working since 2015 on this, and I'm thrilled that it has been so successful. I am thrilled to hear from tournament directors how much it has been helping them in running their tournaments. and saving them time and effort, and uh, allowing them to get sleep during the nights, things like that.
Right.
So to me, there's kind of no contest. That is what I would consider to be my crowning achievement, but I ain't done.
Yeah, I think that's certainly outstanding, and I can give you my personal feedback. Before we didn't have any of that. Now we have everything at the touch of a button. So, really appreciate that. One of the things that people really enjoy most about these interviews is sometimes we get a chance to go through some problems. So in the last couple of minutes that we have, I wanted to go through a quick problem here. Um, Let's see. So this is one that you had posted on the recent social media forum, and just in about the last 2 or 3 minutes that we have left, we'll kind of look at it and kind of analyze it. So you're white with a 4-3 to play. It's an 11-point match. Brown is leading 5-3. So you were 8 away against 6 away, and you have a 4-3 to play. So what were your thoughts when you were playing this?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's note the two key features of this position. Okay, one is that uh, there's a blot sitting there that can get hit, right? And the other is, well, gee, we've got two guys in the back that can make the defensive bar point. And yeah, you've actually got two different blots that can be hit, but of course you can only hit one of them. Uh, and so, of course, you got to look at the race here, right?
Yep.
So, uh, white is 20 pips down. And so, of course, you want to hit, right? But on the other hand, anchors don't necessarily grow on trees, right? There's a lot of play left in this game. Uh, and so making that defensive anchor also looks pretty good. It's not like both of these checkers are going to get away. If the checker on white's 5 point, if they roll a 5, well, there's still a lot of work to be done to come home. So this was a position that I actually blundered on. I said, well, take the bird in hand, lock up that asset,
Yep.
and plenty of game left to go. No rush here. It's not like if I hit anything stopping anyone. But you know what? That was a huge mistake. And I was surprised upon doing the analysis at how big a mistake it was. And that's really, look, of course everybody gets things wrong, but when you when,
Take a
when
look.
you when you blunder, yeah, look at that. So that you've got about six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've got about 6 plays here that where's the anchor play?
Here.
Oh, there. Okay, that's the one I thought. Okay. There are five plays that all involve hitting. And then the anchor play is there. It's a double whopper, right? Double whopper, 0.2 error. Like, I never saw that coming. Like, this kind of blew my mind. So I really wanted to understand what's going on here. How did I miss this so badly? And there were a few things that I realized are important here. And one is backgammon is a race, right? It's just a race. So hitting is simply 10 pips gained in a race that is that you're 20 pips down. That makes a big difference. And the two back checkers are not really under threat at the moment, right? So as much as you can make the anchor, they're not under threat. And why are they not under threat? Because first of all, there are only 2 points that are building upon them, right? So they're not really under the gun, one of those 2 points is stripped. And if they're attacked, you've got two of Brown's blots elsewhere on the board that still remain to be cleaned up. So there's really no urgency to do much about those two back checkers. So hitting is just really strong because it actually accomplishes the more tangible thing, right? Chances are extremely good that white is going to anchor up anyway, right? Simply rolling an ace or attacking something while you're behind, so you're going to tend to attack, right? So when you tend to attack, you tend to get hit. And when you tend to get hit, you got more opportunities to anchor. So the chance that white doesn't get anchored and get blitzed off this board are very, very low. And as a result, you take the hit because it gains you 10 pips in the race, and it's strong. And I started to look at how bad. And one more thing, of course, is that white is also behind in this match, right? So it's worth noting that you're going to tend to be less gammon shy and things like that. You're going to tend to be able to take a little bit more chances when you're behind in the match. So I started to kind of look at this and say, well, really, what do you have to change here in order to and if we look at the hitting, right, let's consider what the hit means, right? If I come down 13-10 and hit, what do I do with the 4? Well, kind of all the 4s are awful, right? I mean, bring another checker down from the mid. That kind of looks a little bit aggressive. Come out to the bar point. Well, you're still leaving. Now you're leaving 2 blots and giving good 6s from the roof. Just make the beginner play and come to the 6 point. They all looked lousy. But you know what? 10 pips is 10 pips. And if you play safe, those pips are yours. They're in the bank. So it's just right. The race is just so important in backgammon, and this is really just no exception. You get to hit with really not much in the way of downside, and that's often what you're looking for, right? Sometimes if you hit, there can be a lot of downside, right? You're in immediate danger if you don't do something else, or defense is more important, or there's 10 checkers in the zone aiming at you, or whatever it might be. But that's not the case here. So you take your gain and you hope for something better next turn. Yeah. But I was shocked at what I had to change to start making that bar point correct.
This
right?
kind of change you did.
Yeah. So look at the contrast, right? And what has changed between those two positions, right? So put back the other one, the other one.
This is the original one.
Yeah, no, I mean the revised one, right?
This,
oh yes, sorry.
they look similar.
They look very similar, okay? But what's changed? Well, Brown's 8 point is no longer stripped, so there's another checker in the zone, right? And white has gained a fair amount in the race because we've moved checkers from the 13 point over to the 6 point. So now the race is only 11 points. Right? Now, hitting is still good because now you make the race even. Okay, but an 11-point race is obviously a lot easier to overcome that kind of deficit than when you're down 20.
Right. Now they're close.
And now they're close, but look at this. My rollout was a bit longer, I think, and I think it got even closer. But coming from the midpoint to the 6 point is still barely correct. And look at that hideous position after you do that. You've stripped the midpoint. You've got 7 checkers on the 6 point, and it's still, let's call it tied. Okay, but that's how strong that racing game is, and that's how weak the threat is on the other side.
That's
Is that it's still right here, and this was an utter shock to me. And
yeah.
this is how you learn. You learn by finding these.
Yeah, this is the way to learn. This was actually a valuable lesson in addition to of course the interview. This was a very enjoyable. I certainly learned something from that position and learned a lot about you and appreciate all of your contributions and tireless efforts for many, many years. So I have to congratulate you and show my appreciation and gratitude for everything you've done. I also appreciate your time with me today doing the interviews. Hopefully we can do some more videos sometime in the future when you have more time. I understand you're busy. Do you have any final remarks before we go ahead and conclude?
Yeah, the one thing I really had wanted to say before that we kind of got cut a little short. With regard to the worldwide rules alignment effort, I got to say this would not have been possible without other like-minded people working on this with me from around the world. People like Jansari, people like Arda, other members there who showed tremendous flexibility and open-mindedness and a desire to get it right. Okay, not just I defend my turf, you defend your turf, let's fight it out and see who can score the most points. But this was a truly an effort worldwide to get the right result. And look, you don't get everything you think that you prefer, but I am really happy with this outcome. I think we've got a great rule set, and it would not have been possible if everybody was not equally determined to do the right thing here. So thank you all for that.
Yeah, everything always works best when people collaborate together. So, outstanding job. I know you had mentioned to me you're not going to be at the upcoming tournament here in Los Angeles, but I know you enjoy coming here at other occasions, and I hope to see you sometime in the future. It's always a pleasure to speak with people like you and others over these video conference calls, but it's even more of a pleasure to be able to see you in person, hopefully in the near future.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for your time. We'll go ahead and conclude the video. I want to thank the viewers for watching. I appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Please let me know what you think in the comments below and what you'd like to see in future videos so I can work on that. Again, my book, Backgammon Backgame Strategies, is available. There's a link in the description to where you can get it. And if you're interested in lessons, please email me. My email is in the description. I look forward to seeing you in future videos. And until then, keep rolling your dice.